In this video, I am going to graph a function. We are given f of x is equal to sine of x, and we need to graph y is equal to f of pi over 2 minus 2x for x between negative 180 degree and positive 180 degree. That is, x is between negative pi radian and positive pi radian. That's what it is. Now, before we can sketch slash graph the function, we need to be able to find what the function is. So, given f of pi over 2 minus 2x, we are going to apply this definition, f of x is equal to sine of x. That's going to give me sine of pi over 2 minus 2x. Now, this is the function we need to graph. However, it will be easier for us to graph something simpler. Remember the trig formula. If you have sine of pi over 2 minus theta, which is the same as cosine of theta, we are going to use this formula to simplify it. So it's going to give us cosine of 2x. So in essence, what we are graphing here is y is equal to cosine of 2x. However, before I go ahead and graph it, I need to kind of do something else. That something else is kind of give you an idea about the period of these trig functions. As you know, if you have y is equal to cosine of x or y is equal to sine of x, right? If you have these two functions, both of these guys have a period of 2 pi. What it means is that these functions repeat themselves after 2 pi length, okay? Now, in our case, we do not have sine of x or cosine of x. What we have is cosine of 2x. So that's slightly different. Now, what is the impact of multiplying x by 2? The impact is that it changes the period of this function. Now, the natural period was 2 pi. Now, in our case, is going to be something different. It's going to be 2 pi divided by the number that you are multiplying x by, which is 2. So that basically makes the period for this function to be just pi, because 2 cancel out. So that's the thing you need to know. Okay? Once again, this is important. Multiplying x by 2x, 2, multiplying x by 2, what it does, it changes the period of the function from 2 pi to 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. Now we are going to try to sketch it. Now I am going to try to sketch this function. I have given some values here along the x-axis for pi, up to pi, positive pi and negative pi. I go from 0 to pi over 4, pi over 2, and then 3 pi over 4 and pi, and similarly negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 4 to negative pi. Because the function wants you to, the problem wants you to graph between negative pi and positive pi. Now let's start off with the table. It's easier to create a table and see how things are moving. Remember, the key thing is that the period of this function is pi, meaning after pi it is going to repeat itself. Okay? Now, let's see. When x is 0, is going to be cosine of 2 times 0 is 0, but cosine 0 is 1. So let's say this is my 1. So this point. Now, x is pi over 4 is going to be cosine of 2 times pi over 4 is equal to cosine of, so 2 goes into 4 twice, so it's going to be cosine of pi over 2, which is, by the way, 0. So from here, at this point, the function comes down to 0. Now, what about pi over 2? If x is pi over 2, is going to be cosine of 2 times pi over 2. 2 cancel out, that gives you pi, cosine of pi, which is, by the way, negative 1. So at this point, the function is going to come down to negative 1. Okay? Now, next, let's say x is equal to 3 pi over 4 is going to be cosine of 2 times 3 pi over 4, which becomes this cosine of 3 pi over 2, which I can write as pi, actually is pi plus 3 pi over 2, which is going to be just cosine pi over 2, but negative, right? Because it's in the third quadrant. In the third quadrant, cosine is negative. So, but pi over 2 is 0, so that's going to give you 0. So at this point, it's going to go back to 0. So this point, at this point, it goes back to 0. Now let's try the pi value, which is this. Cosine of 2 pi, which is going to be just 1. So at this point, is somewhere around here, is going to come back to 1. Now let's look at it on the left hand side. Again, at pi over 4 negative, at this point is going to be 0. Okay. Now at negative pi over 2 is going to be negative 1, and at negative 3 pi over 4 is going to be 0, and at negative pi is going to come back to 1. So now if I connect these points, okay, I'm going to get the following. It's not going to be perfect, but I'm going to try as much as I can. Now it's going to come down like this. Go like that. Let me try it again. Oops, not good even. I'm gonna just try to, okay, like that. Now let's go back and do it on the left hand side. It's gonna come down like this, and it's gonna go up, and then it's gonna go like that, exactly like that. So this is how it's gonna look like. So when you are sketching this thing, you need to find the critical values, okay, some special values, like where the function is 1, where the function is 0. That's exactly what I have done. I basically found the values where the function is 1, 0, 1, 0, and 1, and I identified those points and then sketched it. And this is how you should be doing it. Once again, let me summarize what I have done. Basically, I have graphed this function y is equal to f of pi over 2 minus 2x, which is nothing but sine of pi over 2 minus 2x, correct, which simplifies to cosine of 2x. Now, in essence, this function in red is nothing but y is equal to cosine of 2x. That's what it is. Now, how did I find this? How did I sketch this function? I took some specific values of x, and I found the corresponding cosine of 2x. And those are basically values of 0 and 1. And we know that this is a sinusoidal function or periodic function, okay, trig function. They repeat themselves, okay. So in our case, it repeats itself after pi, okay. So period is the pi. So now what we are going to do, we are going to identify those critical points, and then we are going to try to connect those points and sketch it. And if I sketch it, this is what I get. Okay, I hope that this discussion was helpful. Thank you very much. Okay.